Breaking news, we're following the Taliban's advance continues in Afghanistan. The militants have now taken the city of Herat. That is the country's third largest city. They've broken through the front lines in Kandahar. That's the second largest city in Afghanistan. Well, I want to welcome retired Lieutenant General Hertling for perspective on all of this. Good to have you with us. This is happening at a rapid pace in just the last week, city after city, and now the third biggest city has fallen to the Taliban. What's your reaction?
Yeah, Lynda, many Afghan watchers were predicting over a month ago that things were going to be bad. I was one of those that said it's going to be probably a lot worse than most people think. And this is even worse than what I thought. Truthfully, I think the Taliban have gone very extreme in terms of their attacks, and they've gone very overt, where in the past when US and NATO forces were there, they were covert in terms of trying to inject cuts by 1,000 knives. Now they are free-falling, and truthfully, they are attacking cities much faster than I would have expected. You remember Secretary Austin and General Milley a few weeks ago said that the Afghan government would probably reallocate their forces to defend the large cities. Truthfully, the Afghan National Army was not as adept and the government was not as agile to do that during the short period of time, and the Taliban just created a momentum that is hard to withstand.
Lieutenant Hertling, this is happening about 3 weeks before the US mission is due to end there. At this point in time, what sort of response do you think we can expect from the US?
There's not much from a military perspective, certainly not one from a diplomatic perspective. We've already handed that advantage over to the Taliban in conducting diplomatic relations with them during the latter stages of the previous administration, when they were told that they had to conduct affairs with the Afghan government, and yet we didn't bring the Afghan government to the table. So truthfully, they know that they have an advantage at this point, that the Afghan government is not collaborating correctly with their provinces. They are not controlling their military very well. The Afghan military right now does not have faith in the government to conduct a counterinsurgency operation, and the Taliban is conducting a masterful insurgency using threats, multiple killings, and moving from the rural provinces into the big cities. There's not much we can do right now. We might be able to provide continued air support, but not much. If you don't have soldiers on the ground or Afghan army on the ground calling in those airstrikes, it's very hard for them to hit the targets that they need to hit. Other than that, you're talking about the insurgency that is cropping up throughout Afghanistan. If you look at a map right now, most of the provinces are being run by the Taliban, and it's very difficult to determine what your targets would be with a limited number of airstrikes. And truthfully, Lynda, those airstrikes are not going to have that much of an effect at this stage of the insurgency.
General Hertling, there was a lot of discussion over the last few months since the US president made the decision to end the mission there in Afghanistan. And a lot was said about, if not now, when. In terms of training of Afghan forces, could more have been done?
Well, I don't see how that could have been possible, Lynda. I mean, you're going to hear the repeated drumbeat that US and NATO forces trained over 300,000 Afghan soldiers. But there was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of ghost soldiers. And again, I go back to the fact that an army will fight for a government that it believes in. There's an old military formula that says power equals resources impacted by leadership and by size. So you might have the size and the leadership, impacted by will. The Taliban have the will, and they also have the leadership, and they also have the influence right now, and they also have, they don't have to contend with the Afghan government. The Afghan government is truthfully weak. They have, even though they have a strong army, that army has not shown, except in some cases, the will to fight. So if you have that formula of power equals resources times will, exponentially included by leadership, you're talking about the Taliban with an advantage. An army won't fight unless it believes it's fighting for something. The Taliban have the will. They believe they're fighting for something. their ideology. And truthfully, the Afghan army does not have the belief in either the Afghan government or the camaraderie with their fellow soldiers. And once the Americans and the NATO forces left, the Taliban gained free rein.
And rapidly so. In terms of the capital, what are your concerns there? Because US intelligence fear that it could be isolated within 30 days and potentially it could fall within a few months.
I think you're probably going to see less than that, Lynda. That's my concern. Who would have thought that Herat, the third largest city, would have fallen as it did so quickly? The reports coming out of the Afghan National Army that soldiers are in fact deserting their posts, deserting their units, give an indication that they're not willing to fight for the government. So what you're talking about is an encirclement of the Afghan capital in Kabul, and you know, unless you can maneuver forces, and unless you have the forces to maneuver, which the Afghan government is realizing that they're losing that capability to both have the forces and to maneuver them to defend the capital, it's going to be very difficult. And even if you do defend the capital, in the center, close to being in the center of the country, if you've lost the rest of the country, which is readily apparent is happening right now, it's going to be extremely difficult to maintain your hold on political, diplomatic, and military power.
Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, really good to get your perspective. We are going to stay on this story, but right now we're going to take a quick break. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Lynn.